Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randirhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
I wound up touting the Trump narrative for over a decade. That was my job. Always stay on message. Always defend.
He went on to explain that you live by the gun and by the knife, and you die by the gun and by the knife.
How many times did Mr. Trump ask you to threaten an individual or entity on his behalf?
Quite a few times.
50 times?
More.
100 times?
More.
200 times?
More.
500 times?
Probably.
When you were chosen for this job, did you have any choice? Is this something you had to do when you were asked to do it?
Everybody's job at the Trump Organization is to protect Mr. Trump. Every day, most of us knew we were coming in and we were going to lie for him on something. And that became the norm.
Oh, we're all tied up.
We're all together.
All together.
All together.
Right.
We think together, hang together, live together.
I did things and I acted improperly, at times at Mr. Trump's behest. I blindly followed his demands.
But did you know what they meant?
Well, I never asked what it meant, but it meant like sort of in the style of an organization, or in that style. But you don't bother. I didn't bother. I never did bother.
You never did what?
I never bothered to find out what it meant, but I have an idea what it meant.
That's how he speaks. He doesn't give you questions. He doesn't give you orders. He speaks in a code.
As the senator put it before, what did I get out of it?
What'd you get out?
Nothing but misery.
My loyalty to Mr. Trump has cost me everything. My family's happiness, friendships, my law license, my company, my livelihood, my honor, my reputation, and soon my freedom.
It's not personal, Sonny. It's strictly business.
Oh, my God. That's Joe Valachi over there, everybody. Joe Valachi. Those Valachi hearings were led back in the day, okay? I think it was, like in the 60s. And that is where the Godfather, the scene with Frankie Pantangeli and all that is exactly the set. I mean, they used the Valachi hearings in Congress to create the Godfather hearings where Michael Corleone, except of course Michael Corleone doesn't testify the way Joe Valachi did because, Frankie Pantangeli, sorry, who is Michael Cohen in this? Didn't testify because Michael Corleone brought in Frankie Pantangeli's brother to sit there and to send a message in code to Frankie that if he testified, his brother would get it, right? And so what Trump did in the modern day was tweet out that Michael Cohen's father-in-law would get it if Michael Cohen testified, right? You see? So I got to say, anybody who is looking at what is going on here with Michael Cohen and what's going on here with the Trump Organization would be making a very big mistake by comparing this to Nixon. And this is what I'm hearing a lot of on the TV, that this is all about what Nixon did, only because the similarities are, the similarities are simple ones. The similarities are that Nixon broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters or hired thugs to break into the National Committee headquarters, right? And that in this case, Russia, a foreign adversary, a mafia state, seriously, a mafia state with a mafia-run oligarch in charge of it, with all of his capos giving vig back to him in order to do business anywhere on his turf, which is Russia. Okay, that is not the same as Richard Nixon hiring, a couple of thugs to break into Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist office or the Democratic National Committee. So I think that the analogy there is very flawed when they say this is just like Nixon. No, this is not just like Nixon. This is like Valachi. This is like a mafia case. This is like the Godfather. This is like Frankie Pantangeli. This is like a RICO investigation. That is what this is. That's what the Valachi hearings were all about. It was about RICO, okay? It was about Cosa Nostra. It was about organized crime and how it was organized. And if you want to think of Donald Trump as something, think of him as the American Don for the Russian mafia. Okay, because that's what Donald Trump really is. He's no more, he's no less. He is the godfather of the American mafia with regard to, the territory. And Russia is letting Donald Trump control this territory of theirs. And it's so unbelievable. I mean, the Valachi hearings were about explaining to the American people that there was a mafia. Back then, people didn't believe there was a mafia. They used to say things like Senator Geary says in The Godfather, this is just an attempt to besmirch the fine Italian Americans who I consider to be the salt of the earth, right? This is all to besmirch. And in fact, we had this conversation when The Sopranos first started. Remember? Poor James Gandolfini, we miss you. But when The Sopranos first started, we still have our Edie Falco, though, gotta say. When The Sopranos first started, the same conversation. Is this an attempt to besmirch the fine name of Italian Americans who are the salt of the earth? No, it isn't. It's an attempt to show what organized crime organizations look like. That's it. And Donald Trump is, he's the American Don of the Russian mafia. You got this family of his involved in all kinds of schemes and frauds and lying and cover-ups and crimes for years-long periods of time. And Donald Trump is the person who has the clear benefit of leadership in this organized criminal organization. Now, that's what RICO is all about. RICO is about charging an organization with one charge, a RICO Act violation, which takes into account everything, the speaking in code, okay, the day-to-day crime, the rarely directing of ordering a lieutenant to do something illegal, but instead offering oblique instructions or expressing general wishes. And, that their lieutenants would simply know how to translate into action. And that is what Jerry Connolly, that is what Justin Amash, a Republican from Michigan, actually questioned Michael Cohen about.
You've suggested that the president sometimes communicates his wishes indirectly. For example, you said, quote, Mr. Trump did not directly tell me to lie to Congress. That's not how he operates, end quote. Can you explain how he does this?
Sure. It would be no different if I said, that's the nicest looking tie I've ever seen, isn't it? What are you going to do? You're going to fight with him? The answer is no. So you say, yeah, it's the nicest looking tie I've ever seen. That's how he speaks. He doesn't give you questions. He doesn't give you orders. He speaks in a code. And I understand the code because I've been around him for a decade.
And it's your impression that others who work for him understand the code as well?
Most people, yes.
That's what he's talking about. He's talking about RICO. He's talking about organized crime. He's talking about a corrupt organization that's covered under the Racketeering Influenced Corrupt Organizations Act. That's RICO. That's what RICO stands for. Okay? And it's a law designed to allow prosecutors to go after enterprises, organizations that engage in extended, repeated, organized fraud or criminality. Okay? There are predicate crimes that need to come under, the prosecutors have to consider, are these predicates met? If the predicates are met, you can charge RICO, right? And they stitch together evidence of a corrupt organization, and then they go after everybody who's involved in that organization as part of an organized conspiracy to benefit its leadership. That's what the Trump Organization is. That's what the Trump Foundation is. That's what the Trump charities are about. That's what, everything is about benefiting Donald Trump, no matter how they file it, no matter how they present themselves, okay? Now, the predicates include things like violent crimes, which we don't have evidence of here, like murder and kidnapping and arson and robbery. But it also includes things like fraud and obstruction of justice and money laundering and even aiding or abetting illegal immigration, like Trump does at the various golf courses. Like he actually will have his HR people drive somebody who is undocumented that he likes to a place to get fraudulent documents that are more convincing than the ones they currently have. All these stories that are out there seemed like disparate little items until you realize they're all being brought together by the Oversight Committee, by the Judiciary Committee, by the Ways and Means Committee, by the Foreign Affairs Committee. All of these things are being brought together in one big, giant package of RICO. That is why there were 81 requests from 81 separate people and entities put out there by Gerald Nadler at Judiciary. That is why. And I hope everyone understands that the reason why these specific organizations and entities were selected is because there can be no claim of executive privilege with them because they've either cooperated with Robert Mueller, a la Don McGahn. You know, Don McGahn is a senior White House official. But the only person that can, claim executive privilege is the executive, is the president himself. And when Mueller wanted to talk to Don McGahn, the president didn't exert executive privilege. He didn't assert, that's the right word. He didn't assert executive privilege. So Don McGahn was able to talk to Mueller. And so there can now be no claim of executive privilege that Donald Trump can assert because he previously allowed Don McGahn to talk to Mueller. See, these 81 were picked for very specific reasons. And one of those major, major reasons is that the documents that are being asked for are all documents that have previously been produced. They'd been previously produced by the people on the list, either to congressional committees, to Robert Mueller, to SDNY, to a Virginia court, to a Manhattan court. See what I mean? And that is why this 81 is so, it's moving so fast. They're getting compliance, and they're getting compliance pretty quickly because these are documents that are already packaged together for discovery purposes, for turning over to various entities.
So this is a big list. 81 people is a lot. Have you had any response already? I realize this is the first day.
Yes, we have. We've been having some very positive responses from a number of the 81 people today.
In what sense?
Well, they've been saying they will give us documents, and some have already started giving us documents.
Do you anticipate that these letters and these requests that you sent out today will be the first step towards subpoenas to some of these people and entities if they don't cooperate?
Well, if they don't cooperate, yes, but we don't know that they won't cooperate. In the initial batch of requests we sent out to these 81 people, we limited the requests to material that they had already submitted to other agencies, to the special prosecutor, the Southern District, so that there could be so that they could respond quickly and there could be no question of privilege. We will follow up with some of them, maybe many of them, with other document requests that for documents they haven't already submitted to others. But to get speedy compliance, to start the work very quickly, the initial document request was for documents that they had already turned over to other people.
You see, there is a method to the Judiciary Committee. There's an actual thought process. This is not Benghazi, okay? This is a serious look at a fraudulent organization headed by the President of the United States. This is a serious RICO enterprise. This is an effort to identify not just the obstruction of justice, not just the abuse of his power in office, but this is about insurance fraud. This is about suborning perjury, asking Michael Cohen to lie. And on the other side, I'll play you a back and forth between Representative Jerry Connolly, where he asks Michael Cohen about the Trump lawyers, the Jay Sekulows, and the group coming to him, and did they ask him to lie for the president? Did they ask him to cover stuff up? Now, that's witness tampering. That's also called suborning perjury. That's also covered under RICO, along with the tax fraud, the bank fraud, the charity fraud, and AOC when she questioned about insurance fraud. This would all fall under the racketeer-influenced corrupt organization law. That's what Congress is doing. And this is what it looks like. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.